I'm Brian London. He's Jonathan Ford. This is the Ford News Podcast. Follow Jonathan at Ford Jonathan5. Follow me at Miami Radio Beast. Follow the show at Ford News Podcast. And do us a favor, wherever you are listening to this, subscribe to the podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, give a thumbs up, and write a comment that says, hey, good show, guys. And that lets other people know to watch and listen to the show. Jonathan, we've got a lot to get to as it relates to the court systems in the United States, but let's start with the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court, and we have Justice Samuel Alito, kind of caught up in a bit of a controversy with some flags hanging outside of his multiple houses. Let's start with the first one. At his home, an upside-down American flag. You know, back in the day, the military would use this to be a sign of distress. But why was Samuel Alito hanging his American flag upside down? What's going on here?
First reported by the Washington Post that they didn't release in 2021, and New York Times basically got the scoop that Justice Alito's wife hung a flag upside down in what they are calling a dispute between neighbors, and that's why the Washington Post said that they didn't publish this particular article, and then the New York Times picked it up, and allegedly the neighbor had a uh, some type of campaign type thing that said "F Donald Trump" in the front yard, so they turned the flag upside down. Well, here's where the theory by Alito falls apart: is that he kind of made the assumption that the flag wasn't there for very long at his residence, but the flag was actually up, according to the Washington Post and New York Times, for quite some time. Um, and the only issues that I see from on the left or even in the media is that the Supreme Court is supposed to be apolitical, so they're not supposed to take a public political stance. And I don't know how far out this should reach. Should you criticize the wife for doing it? But the one thing is Alito should have known better when he arrived home and seen the flag upside down for political purposes.
Okay, you know what? I can possibly maybe kind of believe that Justice Alito's wife was the one that hung this flag upside down, although I really don't believe that. But certainly, right? I know that if my wife does anything, if your wife does anything, if I do anything, my wife knows about it. Like, you can't drive home if you're Justice Alito and see an upside down flag and just be like, I don't know what that is, or I don't know how that happened, and not talk to your wife about it. Like, he can't claim ignorance here, can he?
No, I don't think he can. For one, um, uh, obviously, in the Washington Post article in the New York Scoop, is that the original reporter actually had an altercation with Alito and his wife when they were trying to report on this. And there's also, I mean, when you pull up, you're gonna see the flag. And another thing is, I mean, she's a 70-year-old lady, so I'm not trying to say she doesn't have the capabilities, but it would surely lead me to believe that she would need some type of assistance from Alito to get the flag in the front yard. And again, if he's seen it and being a Supreme Court justice and knowing that he's held at a higher standard than uh, what most judges are held at, because it's a lifetime appointment. And let's just remember, too, that lifetime appointments of the Supreme Court, the concept of that was that then the Supreme Court wouldn't be uh, infiltrated by any type of outsource of persuasion because their job is secure, right? So what we have to understand is that the Supreme Court, even in the founding of it, was to be apolitical at any point during this. But there's nothing in me that says to believe Alito in this case, just like what we're going to lead into another incident at another residence of his beach house property that also had a flag being held that is now under scrutiny from the Democratic Party.
Yeah, so at Alito's beach house down the Jersey Shore, he was flying an appeal to heaven flag.
But today, the flag has become, quote, a symbol of support for former President Donald J. Trump for a religious strand of the Stop the Steal campaign and for a push to remake American government in Christian terms.
So here we go again. Another house, another flag that shows support for Donald Trump. It's unheard of, really, to be honest with you, in my knowledge of the Supreme Court, to just bluntly show support for a candidate by a Supreme
Not
Court
only this,
justice.
yeah, but not only the support for Donald Trump, it's also the support that our 2020 election um, wasn't secure or safe, or there wasn't widespread voter fraud. When all of our intelligence agency has said the 2020 election by far was the most secure election that we've had in the modern history, and it also shows a pattern with other Supreme Court justices, like Justice Thomas's life, sending text messages to Mark Meadow in support of a coup. So we're seeing a pattern and a shift to where many people feel like it's time to kind of rein in the Supreme Court on the ethics side. And also, I believe the Democratic Party on Thursday started calling for Alito basically to come forward and speak, and also to recuse himself from the immunity case or any case that comes forward to the Supreme Court dealing with Donald Trump.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever been in a place like this where you have two Supreme Court justices. Listen, we've had Supreme Court justices that are on one political side or another, right? That's the whole idea, like
Mhm.
of what depending on what president nominates them to the court. Sure, but for the most part, they try to play it down the middle and be apolitical. But we're at a point now where two justices are just firmly just don't care. Hey, I love Donald Trump and I don't care. I don't care that you know that. And this is the deal. And everyone's looking towards uh Chief Justice Roberts to kind of put some rules in place here for them to, to recuse themselves from these cases. But the bottom line is, to be honest with you, the Chief Justice has not much more power than any other justice on that court. So he can try to do some things behind the scenes, but really doesn't have that much control over what the other justices on the court do. It's really an
Yeah, and
interesting
let's
situation.
yeah, and what we also have to keep in mind too, Brian, is like, what would happen if any of the left wing Supreme Court justices, the three of them, were hanging Black Lives Matters flags in the front of their house, um, or any type of political? Which you don't hear about that. Like you don't hear or haven't seen any reports of this as of yet, but you've seen widespread reports of Alito and certainly Thomas accepting gifts well beyond what he should have been accepted for free, extravagant trips to resorts, to private jets, to help with college tuition for family members. I mean, it is beyond the thought process I would have ever had even 4 years ago or 8 years ago, that we'd be in a position to where Supreme Court justices are obviously taking sides and not withholding their apolitical stance. Now, there has been through history where they will give speeches on their personal views as far as policies or political, but never to the extent of this franchising well over half the people with flags, basically encouraging a coup or calling the 2020 election illegitimate.
Yeah. Listen, if you're supporting a coup, you don't necessarily, yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily think of Supreme Court justices supporting a coup in their own country. That seems to be a little bit outside the norm, just a tiny little bit. So, I mean, and here's the problem, right? Is the only way that you could remove a justice is to have them impeached and convicted, and that takes 2/3 of the Senate. That's just not going to happen.
Well, yeah, not at all. And for one, it's going to start in the House with the regular impeachment, so you're already blocked there as it is. And then you also have Chief Justice basically making statements that he can handle um, the own ethics complaints within the Supreme Court with this by himself and to hold them accountable. But there's been uh, no proof that he's willing or able to do that up to this point.
Yeah, I just unfortunately I just don't think the way this court is set up that John Roberts has enough power to really make a difference in this issue. To keep it internal, to feel like he can make an impact is just not gonna. I don't think it's gonna fly. I mean, I think at the very least we should see the Senate hold some sort of hearings. It would be interesting to see what happens if they call Alito or Thomas to come testify. It's going to be a three-ring circus.
Yeah, and yeah, it's beyond words right now to where we have uh, these important cases right now coming up for Donald Trump, especially with the immunity case. And here we are dealing with the Supreme Court and multiple people and many people thinking, can we actually trust the Supreme Court to make a judgment based on the Constitution or based on laws and not putting forth their own political side towards it or uh, their wives, which is obviously what's coming out now is that a lot of the wives are making these political spectrum or speeches or flag hanging, and it's just it's out of control. And at some point we've got to get the trust back into the Supreme Court, which right now is at a record low in the US history. I mean, it's not very often that Congress has a higher approval rating than somebody, but they currently do versus the Supreme Court.
By the way, just to go to show you, I mean, we know this how important elections are, but you have Justice Thomas is 75, Justice Alito is 73, Justice Sotomayor is 69, and Justice Roberts is 69. Sorry, Justice Sotomayor is 69, and Justice Roberts are 69. So the next president, or whether it's still Biden or God forbid Trump, they might have three or four Supreme Court justices that they could nominate. And
Yeah,
good
and
luck.
Hillary Clinton said that. Like Hillary Clinton said that, and um, way back in 2016 election that just keep in mind that whatever uh, vote you decide today is going to have consequences later. And you had a lot of very far left wing, imagine that, same thing we're going to be dealing with in this election, that either chose to stay out of voting for Hillary Clinton or potentially voted for Donald Trump. And now we're going to see we've seen what the consequences of that was past the 2016 election. And then suddenly you get this angry of why was Roe v. Wade turned over? It's all President Biden's fault. Why are states allowed to now remove women's reproductive rights when it was all consequences of voters' actions in 2016? And if we don't vote this 2024 election, just like what you pointed out, Brian, we could be looking at 3 or 4 Supreme Court justices that can completely reshape the whole political spectrum for everybody in the United States. And if conservatives get even a bigger majority, you're looking at abortion rights gone, you're looking at reproductive rights gone, you're looking at birth control gone. I mean, the list would just go on. You're looking at gerrymandering districts that are remapped and sent to the Supreme Court. They will be struck down. So for people to vote for one issue just seems completely bizarre to me. And I've never been really a one person voter or
One issue
but
voter.
when it
Yeah.
comes but when it comes to women's reproductive rights or gay rights or I think that's where I draw the line for myself. Uh, but we have to understand is that civil rights back in the 70s established all this that we have today, and we have a lot more to go. But we can't just stop today and say that everything's okay. We got to progressively move forward.
Yeah, just just a quick anecdote. 2016 election night. Uh, we find out that Hillary loses, Trump wins. I'm besides myself, literally beside myself. And I was on at the time Twitter, and a very well-known sports media member was tweeting that they voted for Jill Stein, and I just lost my mind on that person. And we got into it pretty big, but that is all in the past. Let's hope we don't repeat the same mistakes. All right, we're going to take a break here on the Ford News podcast. When we come back on the other side, we're talking about courts. We're talking about the Supreme Court, but now we got to talk about the courts in New York and Donald Trump. His trial could be coming to an end this week. We could get a verdict. We shall see what happens. There's so much to get into as it relates to this. We will do that and more after this. You're listening to Ford News. Welcome back to Ford News. He is Jonathan Ford. Follow him on X at FordJonathan5. I'm Brian London. Follow me at Miami Radio Beast. Follow the show at Ford News Podcast. And please subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening to this right now. And if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to that channel. Hit a thumbs up and make a nice comment. That tells others to watch and listen to the show. Jonathan, we talked about the Supreme Court. Now we got to talk about the court in New York where Donald Trump is on trial for election interference and hush money payments. It is the Stormy Daniels trial, and it could come to an end this week. We could get our closing arguments this week. Court has been on recess over the holiday weekend, back in session on Tuesday, and it's going to be interesting to see how this thing pans out. I think the prosecution has some work to do in their closing summaries in order to kind of convince the jury that Donald Trump was directly involved in this hush money payment scheme in order to prevent the American public from knowing about his time with Stormy Daniels. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I would agree that going into the closing arguments, uh, I would challenge the prosecution to stick more to the evidence that they brought, the text messages, voicemails, emails, and other evidence that basically backs up Cohen's testimony and backs up other people's testimony. But I don't think they have that far off really uh, to go as a lot of the evidence that was shown definitely shows that Donald Trump um, did know that the payments were being made. The only thing that they have to, in my book, uh, prove more is that Donald Trump did it to interfere in the 2020 elections, and I think that's even what I mentioned on the last podcast. Is I think they did a great job in proving that it wasn't legal work. They definitely filed as uh, that it was an income or they filed as an income to Michael Cohen when Donald Trump has repeatedly stated that it was legal fees. But I just think that the closing arguments is going to be more for the defense because of Donald Trump's unwillingness to testify of what was going through his mindset or thought process. But let's also remember that just because you don't testify, it's not admittance to guilt in a criminal case. But I think it's going to speak volumes, and I think that's where the prosecution also has to hit on is that we have Donald Trump that's been outside the courtroom for days and days, basically stating how innocent he is, but his unwillingness to go on the stand and testify of what transpired leading up to the 2016 elections and the payments to Stormy Daniels to basically hush it up so it didn't come light before the election. So, yeah, we'll definitely be. I'll definitely be watching this with pins and needles to see how the outcome. But I do believe we will end up with the verdict. But also remember, it only takes one juror to get a hung jury, so it only takes one. Um, but I also, and I haven't read the article all the way yet. I started to, but it looks like Judge Merchant kind of instructed the jury that their reasonable doubt is a little bit lower than normal, which we will talk about on the next podcast, obviously, when I get a chance to read into this a little bit more.
Right? It might be easier to get a conviction on a misdemeanor than a felony, but then obviously it's not as serious of a crime. So, what is the punishment for that? The other thing is, it'll be interesting to see exactly in which way he gives these instructions. A lot of the articles I've read, a lot of the talking heads I've seen, seem to intimate that Judge Mershon will basically read them the New York law and say, "This is listen. We're not going outside of this. Here's the law in New York. You've got to see if this case meets what the standards are in New York in order to charge Donald Trump with these 34 counts." It'll be interesting to see about those instructions. The other thing is this: as we're looking at the case, everyone kind of talked about how Michael Cohen would be the bombastic witness for or in this trial. But Robert Costello, who at one point in time was trying to be Michael Cohen's attorney, he thought that he could be the go-between Michael Cohen and Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, and he could be the behind the scenes guy. And Michael Cohen never ended up hiring him. He was bombastic. He almost got himself thrown out of the court, well, making different faces at Judge Mershon and whispering things underneath his breath. And everyone that I've talked to and listened to and read seems to say that the jury is going to look pretty negatively on Robert Costello's testimony, and that could have really backfired on the defense, on Donald Trump's attorneys, for putting him on the stand last and then closing their case.
Yeah, it was. I was reading in on this, and it was quite interesting that they put him on the stand. But let's go over a couple things that he stated. At the first, he stated that Michael Cohen personally told him that uh, basically Donald Trump knew nothing about these payments. He also stated that his loyalty was only to benefit Michael Cohen. And right off the bat, everybody's like, "Oh my God, Costello's, shut the door, case dismissed. Let's get it over with. It's done." But then we also realized that he also made statements that basically questioned Michael Cohen's loyalty to Donald Trump and stating, "Oh my God, he's going to betray the president. Who in the heck does Michael Cohen think he is?" Um, Basically going against the most powerful person in the world, and then also showing his anger towards Cohen because he admitted that at no time did Michael Cohen hire him to represent him. He was never Cohen's attorney. And I think what I kind of took from it, just on a personal stance, was that even though people don't trust Michael Cohen, and I've said on here, Brian, I think you've heard me say it, that I think Cohen was a slimeball and a liar and all that. But when you're to the point to where even Michael Cohen doesn't trust you to hire you as attorney, you know that you're somebody that has got credibility issues. And let's also remember uh, here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I'm pretty sure it came out in court in a little quick snip that he actually works for Trump's attorney. I believe is Blanche Blanche. I believe he works for him,
Blanche. Yeah, Todd Blanche.
or Blanche. Yeah. So he actually works in the same like law firm. Now, granted, they have a bunch of law firms and whatever, but it just digs in. And then during this whole thing, he definitely got the judge's attention. Uh, when the judge kept making orders or there'd be objections and the judge would strike it down and he would go ahead and answer the question to where the judge had to say, hold on a second, this is my court. When I say when I order that we're not going to answer a question, you don't speak. And of course, Costello kind of side-eyed him to where he said, okay, that's it. Jury, time to go. You guys got to get out of here for a moment. Let us discuss this. And at one point, he was threatening to throw out Costello's complete testimony. Like he was like, one more outburst. If this continues, I may just throw it all out. But it was definitely he hurt himself. And when I was thinking about this late at night, I always read how everybody couldn't wait for Cohen to lose his temperament and fly off the handle on the stand. But he showed poise and calmness and answering direct questions. And it was actually the defense that brought somebody up that actually was the one that lost their cool and totally hurt his credibility. I believe with the jury and certainly with the judge.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I feel like this is going to be you remember where you were when a verdict came down. There's a bunch of those cases, right, that we remember over time, where you remember exactly where you were when a verdict came down, whether it was the OJ case, the Casey Anthony case. There's been a bunch of cases over the years. You remember exactly where you were when you were watching the verdict come down. This is going to be among them. And boy, are the populace going to be split on this one, depending on how this case comes down. If this is the week, it's going to be a huge week, Jonathan, for those of us that are paying attention to this sort of things. Let's change focus for a second to another court case, the documents case down here in Florida, of course, being overseen by Judge Eileen Cannon. So, we had these instructions by the Department of Justice given to the FBI as it relates to them searching and investigating these stolen documents, both with President Trump and President Biden. Now, in those instructions, right, it gave basically permission for agents, if they really had to, where they could use lethal force. Now, President Trump, basically falsely claimed in a fundraising email, I think he sent it out Wednesday, that, it was President Biden that gave these instructions, that, he had the FBI locked and loaded and ready to take out Trump, which, of course, was not true because the same exact instructions were in the document used to investigate President Biden for the documents that were taken. Now, we know the difference in this case is that President Biden willfully definitely gave the documents back and had no issues and took part in the investigation, and they decided not to charge President Biden because he was nice about it and gave the documents back. President Trump, on the other hand, had Walt Nauta hiding things. So basically, Jack Smith, after Trump sent out this fundraising email on Wednesday, where he said that President Biden had the FBI locked and loaded and ready to take him out, Jack Smith moved in that case to basically say, listen, this violates the gag order that is a part of the condition of release that Trump is under. Remember, Trump is out of jail, right? He got booked. He's out of jail. And as a condition of his release, he's not supposed to say certain things. This would violate that. So that Jack Smith will go to the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, which oversees Florida, oversees this district where Judge Cannon is, to have her removed from the case because she's obviously very partial to Donald Trump, Jonathan.
And let's go back a little bit here and touch base on the search warrant and the FBI and law enforcement given the green light to use deadly force if needed. For one, it's a copy and paste. Like it's issued on every single search warrant. that's handed out. It's literally copy paste on every single search warrant. Let's also understand that it's known that the Department of Justice and local law enforcement was communicating with Secret Service and Donald Trump. He wasn't at Mar-a-Lago. He wasn't there for the search warrant. His attorneys were there when the search warrant was present, and everyone makes this comparison, which you brought up with Biden, is that well, Biden didn't get a search warrant, and Biden didn't have wasn't swatted, what they call. It's a simple fact. It's because Biden gave them permission to go to any of his properties um, and search it out. Now, back to what caused this is um, uh, Jack Smith to go uh, back to Judge Cannon and ask her to revisit this is uh, basically a condition of his release, is because Donald Trump is, of course, campaigning and making posts and retweets on True Social, attacking the Department of Justice and local law enforcement that could endanger lives. And that's where we are right now as far as Jack Smith. And I have also seen, Brian, and you brought up that um, they believe this is, if Canada does not rule on this very soon, or elects not to rule on this, that they will go to the 11th Circuit. And let's keep in mind, too, is that this trial is permanently on hold right now. And it's not on hold because of no lack of evidence or it's going to be thrown out of court. It's on hold because there's so many backlogs of motions and things that Cannon needs to decide on that she's just not. And I think that's where eventually here very soon. And I would agree that Jack Smith is going to make some moves to get this trial rolling very soon.
Yeah, according to legal experts, of all the cases that Donald Trump is involved in, this one is the slam dunk. The problem is that
Mhm.
we can't get there from here because it's been completely delayed by Judge Cannon. So
Well, and the
anything
DC
Jack Smith
case,
can
they
do,
said and the DC case.
yeah, for sure. But anything Jack Smith can do to try to get the 11th Circuit to rule that they need to put a new judge on this case and get this thing moving, he's going to try to do. And a lot of people believe that the move that he made this past week, um, after Donald Trump sent out that fundraising email, is him playing chess, not checkers. A really brilliant legal move.
Yeah, and I believe that's why also Jack Smith left out 20 some odd classified documents outside of this particular indictment and charges in the Florida case. It's so then if uh, Judge Cannon does flop this or anything, then he's going to bring it up in a different district or bring it up again and indict President Trump, but or former President Trump. But here's the thing that just it's almost like you have a total different judicial rulings from other judges that have ruled against Donald Trump, and then you got this particular judge that Donald Trump says nothing negative about, praises her on truthful, appointed by him, and it's a slow rolling process. But yeah, there's this one right here, just with the amount of evidence that's come forward, is definitely going to be the one that whatever year it comes to trial, which I believe will probably be, if not elected next year, because like I said, voting has consequences. And I think that if we don't bring this to trial very soon, come the election, it very well may be completely put on hold until after the next 4 years if Donald Trump was reelected as president.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, we're going to take another break. On the other side, you know what? Some people say size doesn't matter, but Donald Trump really believes that size matters. We have to talk about Donald Trump and his thoughts on size when we come back on the other side, when we do our favorite segment of the week. It's the Ford Fact Check. That and more coming your way after this on Ford News. Welcome back to Ford News. He is Jonathan Ford. Follow him at Ford Jonathan5 on X. I'm Brian London. Follow me at Miami Radio Beast on X, and follow the show at Ford News Podcast. And wherever you are listening to this right now, subscribe to the podcast. And if you're watching it on YouTube, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, do all that nifty stuff, and that helps others see and hear us. All right, we've got to get to our favorite segment of the week. It's time for the Ford News Fact Check. All right, Jonathan, we got to talk about crowd size. Here we go again, another crowd size topic. What do we got this week?
So, Brian, and first of all, let's just understand that crowd size doesn't automatically equal votes, right? So we've learned that back in 2016 with Bernie Sanders, who had enormous crowd sizes, who lost to Hillary Clinton. In Wildwood, which was um, a rally that supposedly the held upwards to 80 to 100,000, which is absolutely false. And this falsehood was, of course, brought up numerous times on Fox News, was sent out by the Trump administration and the Trump campaign that they're gaining steam. And it all started with basically Lisa Fagan, who is a Wildwood Press spokesperson. She basically stated to the AP Associated Press that Trump drew between 80 and 100,000 people. But what she came back days later and said that uh, her words were kind of, or statement was taken out of context, is that um, the 80 to 100,000 was basically a tally from everybody that went to the basically these events, and there was dozens of them. There was car shows, concerts, arts festivals, food festivals, everything in this small area. Uh, so basically, it was just the Wildwood officials who were the source of the Associated Press reporting that former President Trump drew between 80 and 100,000 to a beachfront weekend rally. Now says it was not the number at the beach of the rally, but rather it was the number of people in our town. Like, like they're talking restaurants, bars, hotels. I mean, to me, this is completely off of what was originally released. And her original statement said that there was between 80 to 100,000 in the area sharing the same area with dozens of events, and she observed 80 to 100,000 people. This is a completely different statement in a sense, but it's really not, because she said observation of a dozen other events. So she's observing everything. And then Lisa Fagan is the Wildwood Press company. The AP originally cited for the source of the original crowd estimates was quoted as saying eye-popping estimates were based on her own observation on the scene Saturday, having seen dozens of other events in the same space. 5 days later, when asked to explain why the vary between the AP report and the NewJersey.com video reveals the crowd of a few thousand, she basically provided a statement that the mayor, at odds with the wire service, initially attributed to basically the misunderstanding. Um, so let's just make sure that we're clear that nowhere in the permit did it show that uh, there would even be room for 80 to 100,000. I believe the tops was between 30 and 40,000 is what the estimate could have been. But let's also there's basically aerial view of it that it was less than half full. And after about 32 minutes of Trump speaking, the crowd weeded out extremely um, fast, to say the least. And then we also have what just appeared in the Bronx.
Presidential candidate Donald Trump came to the South Bronx today to speak to some supporters and to a fair amount of empty space in Crotona Park. He was as bellicose as you'd expect.
Pictures showing that a venue that is permitted for 3,500 was probably roughly around 2,000. Um, if you're generous, they are feeding him these false crowd sizes, even though, I mean, he can obviously see what's going on in front of him. But it also shows that his popularity, and my point, outside of his base is shrinking. And I know this isn't part of the Ford fact, but we seen last night at the Libertarian convention, Donald Trump spending his entire speech getting booed, heckled, chickens being handed, squeaking up in the air and stuff like that. So um, I just caution people. Like, I never comment on crowd sizes for Donald Trump or for anybody until days later, because you always find out that they take these low pictured angled shots like the Trump campaign does, and the Trump loyalists, to show that this crowd is going all the way back. But it's really only about 20 rows, but looks like it's a mile and a half long.
Well,
So I just question people on it.
yeah, but they also outright lie. I mean, I know I was all over it. You were all over it. They said that one of Donald Trump's sons, whether it was Don Jr. or Eric, tweeted out this picture of the crowds lining the streets of New York as he was on his way to court. Come to find out, those crowds were really there for when Joe Biden was heading to this event with Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, and you had three presidents in New York doing a show. Just complete lies, just outright lies. So not even taking different camera angles, not even manipulating photos. Just here's a photo of something that has nothing to do with what Trump is doing, but here, believe it.
So we actually showed a video, and the video was actually not from President Biden's Radio City Musical Hall event with Obama or with
So I got that wrong?
Clinton. Correct. So the video was actually from the
I got
Howard
fake news.
Stern show.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
the
that's
Howard
right.
Stern show, late April. And he was actually community noted by X for that particular post. And the funny part is it started this like sequence of even myself just having fun of like taking pictures of the Pope giving a speech, and you could see the Vatican and millions of people lined up, and they're like Trump's rally in the Bronx, and people were having fun. But the funny part about this was there was large amount of accounts that were retweeting even my post or even larger post, and then come to find out that it was actually a rally speech from President Biden in 2008, and they were retweeting it and saying, "Look at the crowd that uh, Trump got," but when the actuality was President Obama's 2008 speech.
Yeah, it was Obama. Yeah, it's just craziness. I mean, here's the scary thing. This is a whole nother podcast and a whole nother episode with AI, with fake, all sorts of deep fakes. Who knows what to believe anymore when you see pictures, right? Like, I don't know anymore. Who knows? I don't know. I consider myself pretty smart, pretty astute. I could pick out things, and I just got duped, right? I thought it was Obama, Clinton, and Biden go into the Radio City Music Hall thing. It wasn't. It was Howard Stern. I got duped. So just be careful with what you see out there. But definitely, if it comes from the fingers of the orange one, don't believe the whole crowd size thing, right?
Yeah, and even if you believe, the crowd size, and let's just say the crowd size was that large, which by comparison, these are significantly smaller crowd size that he had in 2020 and in 2016, by my estimates. And in 2020, we know what the result was. The results was he lost the election, and even in 2016, I mean, he lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton. It just came down to battleground states that Hillary Clinton didn't resonate with, and she lost the election. Let's also bring that up, that since that's been a huge topic, just real quick here, Brian, is that people are bringing up like the Democratic Party didn't concede the election or Hillary Clinton didn't concede the election because of the topic that's been brought up, is if the Republican Party will support whoever wins the 2000 election, and if they will basically declare that it was a free and fair election, and they won't do that. And the reason is it's because their claim is that Hillary Clinton didn't concede the election, so why should Trump? When in fact Hillary Clinton, the day after we all felt like jumping off a building, she conceded to the 2016 elections and actually stated that she had called Donald Trump and wished him well and good luck, and as the president, that she would hope that he will do what's right for the nation. And everybody on the Democratic Party was somewhat with that too. We conceded that we lost. I know that fact that I conceded that we lost, but like I said, even though I felt like jumping out of a building that next morning.
Yeah, and it's a shame that the other side, whether it's Marco Rubio or Tim Scott or any of these Republican politicians, can't seem to get the words out of their mouth that they would concede an election or accept the results of an election. Jonathan, before we get out of here, a couple things I think we need to touch on. The first is the other day was a 2-year anniversary of the horrific shooting at the school in Uvalde in Texas, where a bunch of little kids lost their lives, right? I mean, 19 students were killed and 2 teachers were killed and a bunch of others were injured. One of the most horrific crimes I can remember in my lifetime in the state of Texas. Little kids being shot in the state of Texas, and it was a 2-year anniversary, and a lot of people were, obviously remembering those children that passed away. The families are still looking for answers, filing lawsuits because of such a horrific crime. And here you have the governor of the state of Texas, Greg Abbott, didn't say a thing, did not say one thing about those poor little kids that passed away. I don't understand. Is he not human? Does he not have any empathy at all? Is there literally not one emotion that runs through his body? How do you not say anything about little kids that got shot?
It's because, unfortunately, with this tragic event, and I can get into all the details of how long the cops took to get in there, but everyone's picked a political side versus the unfortunate massacre of children inside of um, a school. And whenever I think about what those children must have went through, or what the parents must be going through even 2 years later, I kind of had to pull myself back from the political notions of myself, just because I want to make sure that their children are honored for the spark of light that they were, and for the joy that they brought them while still alive, and not to be remembered for the failures of ourselves and the failures of uh, politicians and the failure of local law enforcement that particular day. What I would uh, like to allow these families to grieve without having this thrown up in their face every single time that they see this tragic event. And I just pray and hope uh, that they continue to find peace somewhere, and know that here at 4 News, we 100% our hearts go out to them at the 2-year anniversary.
No doubt about it. Speaking of remembering, we record this on a Sunday. It will be released on a Monday. Monday, of course, is the observance of Memorial Day. And I know for Jonathan and myself, we send out our condolences and thoughts and prayers to all of those who have lost their lives in armed conflict, who have served our country in the military.
Absolutely.
It is, I feel like in America, on Memorial Day, I was actually just talking to a friend, and they're talking about a barbecue they're having, and they're going to be, drinking beer and barbecuing and hitting the pool. And I kind of thought to myself, well, this day really isn't supposed to be a happy celebration. We're supposed to be remembering those that lost their lives fighting for the freedoms that we enjoy and in the armed services of this country. But yet it's another holiday that's kind of gotten hijacked by commercialism and, hey, let's go out and buy hot dogs and hamburgers and barbecue and drink beer, when really we're supposed to be kind of solemn and remembering those that lost their lives and gave their lives and sacrificed their lives for us and our country. So I think, we should send positive messages out and thoughts and prayers to all the families of those who have lost loved ones in armed conflict, who have served this country and lost their lives.
Yeah. But on the other hand, Brian, and I know sometimes we don't, like, maybe 1% we don't agree, but
Sure.
and I do believe the Memorial Day is a day to kind of remember those that lost their lives. But I also think it's a day to where we can celebrate that we have these freedoms because they lay down the ultimate sacrifice of their
Sure.
life, and that the family members have also laid down the ultimate sacrifice of giving their sons or daughters to us so that we can um, drink a beer or have a bag of chips or sit out in the yard in Florida where it's probably 85 degrees and sunny.
Much
um,
hotter than 85 degrees.
oh well,
Yeah.
it's about 80 here. um, but I think it's a day that we could also um, remember why they made that sacrifice. And I've talked about here repeatedly that freedom of speech is very important, and so is freedom of journalism. And I don't think we have the ability to do even what we're doing right here without that ultimate sacrifice that they made. I, on the other hand, as everybody knows, a recovering alcoholic, so I will not be partaking um, in the drinking. I have reached 19 months, going on 20
Good for
months
you,
of
man. Good for
sobriety
you. Good for you.
after 23 years of alcoholism. So it can be beat, but I want to, and I know I don't talk about sports, but I want to send out a condolences to Gason, PGA Tour winner. Um, Wait, is that his name?
I
Yes.
think it's Grayson.
Um, yeah, Grayson, that basically took his own life due to years of depression and years of alcoholism. And I just want to let people know that there is hotlines out there that you can contact if you ever feel like taking your own life. And you can battle back, even though he tragically lost his life. It's not the end. And I'm the example that you can have depression and alcoholism and feel like you're on the verge of taking your own life and still come out at the other end all right. But to his family, my my condolences to the family, and I wish you guys um nothing but the best in such a tragic event.
Yep. Grayson Murray will definitely be remembered. No doubt about it. And by the way,
And
I
just
kind of like,
everybody, just so you know, sports is not really my thing at all. So to me, to even know that it was Gason or Grayson, is Brian can vouch for this. That's a huge
yeah,
accomplishment for me.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Um, Jonathan, I love it when we disagree. I think that shows how this is actually we actually do have a fair and balanced approach to the facts and the truth that we tell on this show. When we disagree, it shows, you know what? We're not bought by anyone, and no one's telling us what to say, and we can have our own opinions. So
Still
there you
no
go.
advertisement behind us.
No, but feel free to throw it up there. We can be bought if you want us to. We still will have truth and facts, though. Jonathan, thank you very
Yes,
much.
absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone,
Brian.
for listening and subscribing. We really appreciate the support we've gotten. For Jonathan Ford, I am Brian London. We'll see you next time on Ford News.